We are live.
Hello and welcome to almost the last panel of the day. So today we have been having a fantastic day. I'm very proud of our team and the Digital Week Online. I think everyone has been fantastic insights. Even for the experts and less experts, I think everyone can learn and engage and as well learn a lot as well with everything happening. So our panel today is about digital transformation 360, AI and blockchain. And we're going to talk about ethics, about the future of technology, and about all the areas related with this. So I have with me Maya Zuckerman and Maya and as well Shamir Thaha. And we were supposed to have Ben Goertzel, but it seems like he missed it. So we'll go straight away and we'll do a more special panel. So this panel is precisely a bit more expert. And we're going to be having a keynote speak from Maya and from Shamir, and as well highlighting all the different areas, especially when it comes to blockchain and artificial intelligence. So a bit of the bio. So Maya Zuckerman is an author, cultural hacker, entrepreneur, COO of Luman, and she talks normally about her work as a sci-fi writer, advisor for multiple organizations. She has been involved with the World Economic Forum in the project of Global New Mobility Coalition. And as well, she's an emergent media and technology leader. I think it's key to understand when you talk about emergent technology, the fourth industrial revolution, digital transformation, we need to look at all these areas. So both the passion in science fiction, but as well the work in policy and as well researching on these areas is key. And of course, working with organizations like World Economic Forum is particularly interesting for what you're doing. She's as well the founder of Transmedia San Francisco, and as well a writer and researcher. Shamir Thaha is the Global Chief Strategy Officer and CEO of Accubits Middle East, and as well a strategist on blockchain and AI, and has been working in very international big projects from NASA to governments, applying a lot of the things that we're talking in practice. So from artificial intelligence to AI, putting the first blockchain satellite in the space, and as well writing and researching this, which is quite unique for a CEO. So I'm actually looking for, and that's why we push this panel with less people to have as well a bit of input, although we've been having fantastic input in a lot of different areas. So as we have probably Ben out, we're going to be focusing on highlighting both your profiles and to reflect these things. So I will pass the word to Maya first, and I know that you have a presentation prepared, and I'll get the word because I know that you have a fantastic mind and ideas. Welcome on board.
Thank you, Dinis, and such a great pleasure and honor to be on the panel. And I just saw that Ben just joined us.
Ben came. So fantastic. So Maya, if you wait a minute, I'll just do an introduction to Ben, then we go. I think it will be better. So Ben, can you hear us just to make sure that we don't interrupt each other afterwards?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Probably fantastic. So thank you for making it. So that's great because so Ben Goertzel is, I think, quite well known in the world of the AI and blockchain. He's a leading world recognized researcher, thinker, and I would say philosopher for me. As well as the founder of SingularityNet and the chairman of the Open Cog Foundation and the chairman of Artificial General Intelligence Society. And as well the chief scientist of Mozzie Health and vice chairman of Humanity Plus. And his work, writing and ideas have been influencing the way we perceive AI. I think part of the term of AGI has been coined by him. And as well has been a fantastic ambassador to the ideas of ethics around artificial intelligence, technology, and blockchain, and as well a humanist that has been looking at a lot of different areas in terms of strategy and different areas. So I will pass the word to Maya now completely, and then we'll go by order to the next ones. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Ben, if you don't mind muting, we can hear the dog. So hi, everyone. My name is Maya Zuckerman. Thank you, Dinis, for the lovely intro. And I wanted to focus this talk because my work is very diverse, including I'm now decided to take advantage of the lack of things to do here in San Francisco and California in the evenings because of COVID, and taking my MBA in circular economies, because I'm really interested in how everything affects and everything connects. And yeah, I work with Luman, which is a strategy firm, and I work with the World Economic Forum on the Global New Mobility Coalition, just as a side advisor for content and developing the kind of content for how we look at new mobility and the interaction of autonomous vehicles, of things like urban air mobility, smart cities, greener cities, and bringing more equity into the way we travel in cities and move people and products through cities and through our economies. The other part of what I do is I work with, as a volunteer, with the IEEE Ethical Line Design. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And now we've moved our outreach committee to become the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for AI and AS. So we're looking at the ethics around how we connect and bring these technologies to the world in a way that's more evenly distributed, but also think about how we bring in inclusivity to the development of these technologies. So, and there's a few other things, but we will go into some digital transformation, 360 AI, blockchain, and humans. I focus mostly on AI, but this can, because this is technology and the conversation is about humans in my part, this can be also brought into blockchain. I have worked only in one startup with blockchain, but I think my new startup is also going to be looking at using smart contracting and also any kind of like coinage within apps to create a better interaction that's safer with the audience. But this is very early on to actually see and talk about. So definitely been in that world and kind of just looking at what is happening within the conversation of blockchain and all the other technologies that are like it. So I wanted to explore three areas. The first one, I'm going to just dip my toe into it because we have such fine and brilliant people to talk about it. Technology, is AI effective, and very focusing on digital transformation. And then the second part is human, what is the upskilling needs? Because we need to actually upskill our people. And then the third one is ethics. How do we make sure that we're making the future evenly distributed? And how do we, and I'm going to leave you with like just a little model that I worked with for a lab that we did almost 4 years ago around the concept of empathetic coding and how to bring empathy into the development of these technologies. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of new things out there because of this year, and nobody knows what to do with COVID. So my data is a little bit dated to 2018 because I think everybody's saying we don't know. Let's look at what's happening into 2020. But there's a couple of things that I noticed in tech as looking into digital transformation. What is happening right now is that Forrester had a 2018 research, and it's 71% of its respondent actually said that AI is improving business efficiency. And the sector that I've noticed that is really achieving great transformation and actually efficiency is the customer experience. And those are, of course, we all know those little pop-up bots to actually get you to start having an engagement, things like the Intercom API that's been used for a few years now. Everybody knows it, everybody loves it. It's a way for us to connect with our customers faster. So that's one part that says this is great. But MIT Sloan and a couple of other groups have noted that 40% of organizations do not report business gain from AI. And they've seen that the only ones that are actually getting any kind of efficiency are the ones that are investing heavily in AI. And there's still a lot of fails. And what happens within those failures is a lot of people, because they fail the first time, they give up. And this is still not the time for AI to be full on. We're still, a lot of these technologies, not all of them, a lot of the machine learnings are for the majority of companies, not the big ones, but the majority of medium and small size are not as effective. So there's a lot of drop off as people not wanting to continuously investing in the development of these technologies or the adoption because they failed the first time, because it's still new. And they also don't have the skills in their human to actually bring that to market. So there's an interesting discrepancy between some of the data that I've been looking at. But if you actually even look at, this is from 2018, the planned adoption companies over the next 4 years, machine learning is 75%. We also have things like humanoid robotics, non-humanoid land robotics, and quantum computing. So a lot of these technologies are going to be adopted. So we've got, again, a discrepancy between the humans and the technology. The technology is coming, but the humans are not ready. And how do we actually change that? So one of the things we do is we look at how do we upskill our people. Again, this is from the World Economic Forum from 2018. I looked at, there's a couple of new ones, but they basically speak about exactly the same thing, is that what they're seeing that is coming down the line is where we need to invest in our people beyond just upskilling them with technology and complex problem solving is really the human part of it. Because if we are going to have these technologies that are going to solve a lot of these issues for people, we need to know how those people are actually interacting with them and how do they actually create effectiveness for the business and for people around them. So you're actually seeing things like active learning and learning strategies, creativity and originality as kind of the top skills that are needed in our industries coming in 2022 to 2030. And one of the things that are very, very important to look at is leadership and social influence and emotional intelligence are part of the kind of top, and continuously from 2018 to 2022 are things that the World Economic Forum, and I've seen it in other groups as well, are focusing on how important it is to support people in learning it. And those are what people call soft skills. And I actually call them human skills because we need those to actually conduct business. We need also to remember that these technologies are created by us. So if we actually don't focus on that part of emotional intelligence, we're not creating the best technologies. And I now will argue for that again and again. It's also important who's developing and their framework. So upskilling the humans, develop your people as leaders. This is something that our group in Luman really focuses. Everybody should be considered a leader within your group. Doesn't matter their level in the company, because when people actually develop the ability and the capacity to become leaders in their own teams, they actually are more self-reliant. They work better in teams. They actually create more of a social cohesion within the team, and they also think outside the box. And we need people to be more innovative within companies and actually be excited to learn. Investing in your teams, really investing in the human part, which is also part of it is creating psychological safety. These bullet points are, of course, tiny bullet points of much larger things and trainings that need to come into companies to actually create what is the fourth point, which is learning organizations. And learning organizations are organizations that are not creating a wrong or right scenario. They keep on learning. They're supporting their teams to learn. They are upskill their people within. It is actually is much more cost effective to upskill your own people than try to hire people from outside all the time. There's time that is wasted from a person being hired to a person actually being effective within an organization. So upskilling your people is part of what I believe and what we've seen and what the data shows us is really an important step in investing in these digital transformation tools that are coming into our organizations, and they're coming really fast. So there is this kind of, again, discrepancy between where our people are and where the technology is, and we need to bridge that gap. And that actually leads me into a quick conversation around ethics. Ethics is such a deep conversation that if I'm just going to give it like 5 minutes, and it needs a year just to even wrap our heads around it. But this is specifically from a couple of different organizations. One of them is the UN University that talked about ethics and really the conversation of human-centered businesses. And we talking again about the culture of trust, transparency, and accountability. that is the human factor of developing these technologies. If we don't actually start with the humans first, and what is our code of ethics within the company, and how we actually develop these technologies and how we implement these technologies, we're just going to implement them. And if anybody's seen the movie The Social Dilemma, and the coming movie that's coming in November called Coded Bias, by not actually creating these ethics first and implementing them and actually making them not as a nice to have, but a how we actually do our technology, how do we actually work with our people within our organization. If we just add them as a nice to have, we run the risk of creating unethical technologies. We run the risk of, and this has already been happening, technologies that can harm people and actually don't give us good data. Specifically in the coded bias, this is an MIT researcher who's a person of color, and shows in the movie in the beginning that she was doing some work on facial recognition. The AI did not recognize her face. As soon as she put a white mask on, the AI recognized her face. So just that little tidbit and that visualization of the problematic parts of how we actually develop these technologies, and how do we develop our people to develop these technologies. I think it's really, this is my personal thought, but also working with different groups on ethics, that is the majority of the problem, is when we decouple the technology from who's creating it and who's making the decisions, we can actually end up with a lot of problems. And social media is part of it, and how social media is using algorithms to boost up more engagement, not because it's better information, just because it gets better clicks. So that's definitely an example for when the algorithm takes control of our reality. As I said, I'm part of the IEEE Ethical Aligned Design group. They've actually been developing a book. It's all free to download if you go to this website. And again, just bringing home the conversation of, oh, I'm not an ethicist, this is not my responsibility. Really, it's all of our responsibility. We're humans. We need to see that our humanity is being protected, that other people are being protected, that our planet is being protected. One of the three pillars of the ethical aligned design actually talks about not doing harm to the planet and the humans, to nature. So this is really important when we're working with these technologies, to actually think through the lens of ethics first, and then ask a question: why are we actually doing these technologies? Is it actually going to be good for their business, but also good for the humans? And we're not asking those questions enough. And we're not wanting to take the responsibility, but I'm here to actually remind us that it's all of our responsibility. And last, I'm going to leave you with really simple model that we created. Basically, the question is, who's coding? What is the code? So what is the actual code that you're developing? So thinking through the lens of empathy and ethics. The context, like the technical environment, what is it being built in? And then the two other really important parts of it is the content, like what is a social output narrative that is coming out? Like what are you actually creating in the world? And the culture, the social environment. And that is really big of the internal environment and culture environment of a company, but also it's the big question of who's coding, their training, have they had any bias training, and are there actually a diverse and inclusive team that's actually developing this? Because I really, and I've seen a lot of data on this and a lot of new movies and data is coming out of it, the importance of having both cultural biases training, but also diversity and inclusion training, but also diversity and inclusion as we're developing these technologies, paramount for these technologies to actually be more ethical and actually take in their consideration of not only who we're developing for, but who we are as we're developing these technologies. So that's my little model for that. And that is all from me. I'm really excited to be on this panel, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maya. Fantastic insights. And I think a lot of big things that are touching all of us, but especially when it comes to AI and blockchain, which are probably the most disruptive technologies that we're facing, and as well that humanity created, especially artificial intelligence. So I want to pass to you, Ben. And Ben, you are creating these technologies, but you are quite unique because you are not just creating them, but you are as well a philosopher, as well coming from science fiction, but as well an academic. So I think you more than anyone can actually look at some of these things, and I would like to interact with the point that Maya as a policymaker and researcher has been doing, but as well you with the different hats that you have. So how do you see this? And this panel is precisely about AI and blockchain 360. So this is a key element for the future humanity that you've been working precisely with SingularityNet on OpenAI and Humanity Plus.
Yeah, I think it's an important and fascinating time for those of us who have been in the AI space for a while, because we're seeing AI broadly deployed and broadly accepted. And you know, many of us have seen for a long time that AI was going to get to this point and then go significantly further. And I think more and more of the business world and the world of government is starting to wake up to this, although they don't quite know what to make of it or how to cope with it yet, right? And the way I think about what's happening now is that we're in the midst of the first of 3 waves of dramatic AI progress, which I think of as a narrow AI revolution, where we have AIs doing highly specific things, but doing them very, very well. And then people need to be creative, adaptive, and in some cases really genius at like figuring out how to connect these narrow AIs into an overall fabric to do useful things. And then what will come next is what I've called the AGI, Artificial General Intelligence Revolution, where AIs are able to do transfer learning and they're able to generalize far beyond their experience and create and imagine new things more like people can, with one would presume different strengths and weaknesses than people, because they're different types of systems. And following that, you have what's been called artificial superintelligence, and that's AIs that are tremendously more intelligent than human beings. And I mean, it's hard to say anything with definiteness about that stage, but this does tie back to AI ethics, which we just heard was going to take a year to even come to grips with the concepts, right? Because human ethics we can't even understand, and we can't agree on what's ethical or not between different groups on the planet right now, nor do we agree with our own selves from 20 years ago, let alone with our great-grandparents or our ancestors in the Middle Ages. So then to create an AGI that's smarter than us and more powerful than us and doesn't necessarily maintain our ethics of today, because we're not going to, but somehow compassionately co-evolves its ethics with ours. This is a very subtle thing to grab onto, and certainly science and engineering don't have the tools to masterfully deal with that domain at this moment. We're going to need to learn as we go. And what I always say on this is what happened when humanity like stepped out of hunter-gatherer lifestyle into civilized lifestyle. And when we undertook the Industrial Revolution, I mean, we have been leaping into the unknown for some time. What's different is now we're leaping into the unknown repeatedly within a single human lifetime, right? We got the computer revolution, which I still remember being an old man, computer revolution, AI revolution, AGI revolution, ASI revolution. And with a little luck, we're going to personally experience all these things, where it's like no one person experienced, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and all this, the invention of fire and the invention of factories, all within their lifetime, right? So it's dramatic, and I think while there are certainly things that are hard to figure out regarding what's going to happen and what's best to happen, I think to some extent we have to rely on our heart and spirit, as well as our science and engineering. And I mean we have to rely on our instinct and and intuition and common sense, which can do some kinds of processing that we can't yet do in a fully analytical way. So in that vein, it seems to me that, you know, the fact that we're probably on a path to creating AI is much smarter than us, and that most of the AI on the planet today is concerned with what I often describe as selling, killing, spying, and crooked gambling. I mean, like advertising, military espionage, Wall Street, right? I mean, so the fact that most of the AI brainpower on the world is occupied with these small and ethically dubious sectors of human society, and that this is where the AGI and the super AI are likely to come out of. This seems instinctively and from the heart seems perhaps not optimal, right? Like we're not going to get rid of selling, killing, spying, and crooked gambling anytime soon. I mean, hopefully, eventually, humanity is evolving, but there's also a lot of other things. There's creative arts, there's education, there's medicine, there's consciousness expansion. AI can help with all these things as well. There's much less resources and focus going into that. There is some, and so the diversity of rollout of AI into the business world and the government world is increasing year on year, which is fantastic. I mean, we're having, you know, there's I've done a lot of work in AI in medicine, and there's a lot more that can be done there using AI to find diagnostics and cures. One wishes, given the current situation with COVID and kids out of school, that there had been more resources in the AI tutoring systems, because you got all these kids where nobody has time to teach them at home because the parents are at home working and sitting at the computer working on their own or via Zoom classes doesn't work for every kid. I mean, what if all the resources, or say 10% of the resources that had gone into AIs that spy on people or extract their money algorithmically, what if 10% of those resources had gone into AI tutoring systems to help teach kids at home? What if 10% of those resources had gone into AI for the acceleration and development of personalized therapeutics? We might have medicines for COVID now, right? I mean, we can see right now problems we're grappling with semi-competently, and you can't necessarily solve them with AI in like a 3-month burst of effort. But had we been putting the effort into education and medicine with AI that we've been putting into selling, killing, spying, and gambling with AI, right? I mean, we could be in a far better position now. We could have zoinked COVID, and our kids could be learning from, you know, compassionate, benevolent AI tutoring systems alongside their parents and teachers, right? So, I mean, what can we do about this situation? I mean, it's a lot of different things. Anyone who is developing AI or working on the deployment of AI for compassionate, beneficial, broadly beneficial applications is certainly helping. What we've tried to do with SingularityNet is work at the platform level and build a blockchain-based decentralized platform that lets a large number of different AIs communicate and coordinate in a decentralized way with no central owner and no central controller. And the idea there is to create a tool set to enable AI developers and AI users to operate in a way that's not siloed into a big tech company or a big government, but is sort of democratically controlled by all the different participants in the network. Certainly, there's been challenges there. I mean, we built SingularityNet on the Ethereum blockchain because it was the most mature thing at the time. That's become insanely slow and expensive at the moment, although it's the Ethereum 2.0 is coming and hopefully will improve the situation. So on the blockchain side, we're working toward making SingularityNet multi-chain to run on multiple blockchains, and we're going to put a bunch of it on the Cardano blockchain, which seems to be, you know, faster, cheaper, and also have some more advanced capabilities. But I think that blockchain as plumbing is part of the story, but then obviously there's a lot more to it. You need to use that in the right way, right? You don't want to just use blockchain to deploy a bunch of isolated narrow AI solutions that are serving particular agents' aims. You want to use it to create a sort of self-organizing society of minds where the different AIs in the decentralized network are both cooperating to achieve sort of collective intelligence functionality, and there's a long history of this in the AI world going back, I mean, well before Marvin Minsky's book Society of Minds from the 1980s. And the different AIs in the network are also representing interests of a wide wide variety of parties, right? Including AI developers, also including individuals who have put their data into the decentralized AI network or are using the network for various various functions. So yeah, let me mention a few different concrete initiatives here leveraging this sort of decentralized AI platform. So Ocean Protocol, which is a different blockchain project that's a partner of SingularityNet, they've introduced the cool idea of an IDO, an initial data offering. And I mean, I'm an advisor of Ocean. It's been amazing to see their evolution. But basically, you could take, say, your DNA data or your purchasing history, you wrap that up in an encrypted way, put it online out there on the blockchain in Ocean's network, and you then get a token corresponding to your DNA or corresponding to your purchase history data that people can pay to use that to train their AI. There could also be like a trading of futures markets and so forth, and trading on the tokens connoting your data. And I mean, this is part of what I see as the democratization of risk and finance, because the sophistication of financial instruments available to the top, 0.1% of the population have been tremendous, whereas ordinary people, put their money in their bank or stuff it in their mattress or buy an index fund, right? So with things like the initial data offering and more things we're going to see in the decentralized finance space, you see the opening up of complex, AI-driven and generally algorithmic and mathematics-driven financial machinery made democratically available, which is part of the story of democratizing the decentralized intelligence of the global brain of software and hardware processes that we have around the planet. And we're looking at doing a bunch more things in decentralized finance space on top of SingularityNet, because you need new business models to go along with these AIs that are deployed in these new sorts of networks. And I want to finally reiterate the point about medicine, because it's an interesting use case of all these principles. I mean, these general concepts are really horizontal in applicability and in concept, and each vertical market could be its own talk. But if you look in medicine, you can see the strong potential value of AI and the acute need for decentralization of AI. It's sort of right out there, because what do you need to feed your AI? Well, you need people's medical data. Where does that come from? It comes from all our bodies. Where is it sitting? It's sitting in proprietary databases of hospitals, doctors' offices, or pharmaceutical companies, and we don't get either economic or that much medical benefit from the use of the data that's been gathered from our bodies that's sitting out there in somebody's computer file, right? So there's a project called Rejuve, which is spun off from SingularityNet, which is aimed to make a blockchain-based ecosystem for managing medical data in a decentralized way, which can interoperate with Ocean's initial data offerings for genomic data and so forth. So when you get your biological data measured and it goes out there online, you should get some control over what it's used for. If it's used to make someone money from therapies, you should get a small piece of it. But most of all that data should not be siloed in a pharma company or a government agency. That data should be used in a properly encrypted and privacy-preserving way to enable all sorts of brilliant AIs to learn about diagnostic vaccines, therapies, and so forth. And this won't then just be a big company's deep neural net model that's engineered to leverage their huge server farms maximally. It'll be neural net AIs, symbolic reasoning AIs, evolutionary learning AIs from many different paradigms cooperating together in a decentralized network on everybody's data. And just like it seems insane from a high level view that as we're on the verge of creating AGI and artificial superintelligence, most of our AI effort is going to selling, killing, spying, and gambling instead of education, medicine, and the benevolence of AGIs. It also seems insane that with the whole world in the throes of a global pandemic, like, you cannot get access to the clinical trial data from COVID-19 clinical trials with therapeutics around the world. Like, all that data is privately held, and only the high-level summaries are put out there. Like, and all the data from the COVID-19 patients around the world, it's not encrypted in an open way where anyone can study it using AI and bioinformatics tools to understand how to make new therapies. So we're people are dying all over the world, and yet we're still not able to break through these bizarre greed-based and inertia-based silos that are damming up the flow of data about our own bodies. And this persists even though our own grandparents are dying because of this, right? So I mean, so I think on the one hand, incredibly exciting times, and AI is advancing so fast. I mean, it doesn't do everything we would like it to yet, but I mean, it does a lot of things that I was told most of my career were not going to happen for thousands and thousands of years. On the other hand, when you're deep in the weeds, you can see there's so much potential to use AI for broad benefit, which is not pursued now because of industry structure and economic structure issues. And trying to break through those by putting out decentralized tools like SingularityNet or Ocean is, in some ways, it's a harder problem than building the AGI, actually. And we're sort of we're at the intersection of all these issues in this Digital Week Online forum.
Thank you, Ben. I think a lot of fantastic points, and I think especially you talk about benevolent AI, and I think a lot of the projects you've been doing have been tackling this. So I want to go to Shamir. So Shamir, you've been working a lot with governments and actually with NASA. So I think from this level of ethics with Maya, and of course Ben, bridge between ethics and technology, and as well all the initiatives around crossing intelligence between data. And I think the problem that Ben mentioned, that is a fact. We are amid the biggest pandemic in the last 200 years, and no one actually gets a clue in terms of just uniting the data, which would solve at least a lot of the issues with this. But it comes back to our humanity. So in your work, both as a researcher but as well as a technologist, you've been working with leading companies and governments and putting a lot of these things in practice. So can you give us a bit of some of the case studies and as well some of the views that you have on these topics?
Sure, Dinis. Firstly, those were some amazing points, Ben and Maya. I think you've really struck the nail on our concerns on going from ANI to AGI and then ASI, right? And I think both corporates as well as governments have kind of become more cognizant about some of the challenges and have started building policies and regulations around ethics and how data is being used, some of the biases in data. All these are there. And these are some of the same things that we've kind of been witnessing as well when we've been implementing some of these projects. So let me just share some of the real life case studies that we've been part of. Just give me a moment. So over the next couple of minutes, what I'd like to do is to touch upon some of the projects that we've been part of, both at a federal level, some private enterprises, both from a blockchain and AI perspective. And these, I think, would be part of what we call as digital transformation 360. Because if you look at it, everyone's looking at how they can improve efficiencies, increase productivity, and again, there's this thin line balance between how does AI really help? Is it enhancing or augmenting humanity? Or is it replacing people? So it again comes down to what's the policy and what is the governance of these corporates. So just a quick snapshot. These are some of the clients that we worked with. As Dinis mentioned, we worked with some of the federal agencies, including NASA, USPS, USGS, as well as some of the key government institutes within the Middle East who have been kind of very early on in the blockchain adoption space. So when we take on a digital transformation, be it business or technology transformation, we call it digital transformation, we basically go through a framework before we actually implement something, where we try to assess the as systems, processes, analyze the impact of it, whether it's a viable and feasible platform that would make sense. Look at a pilot implementation, and with any digital transformation, you need to consider for change management. So we plan and manage the change, and then obviously evaluate the impact of this implementation and iterate further. So what I'd like to do is to perhaps pick 3 or 4 maybe use cases that we've been implemented. One of the very interesting projects, if you're familiar with the Middle East and UAE in particular, they have had a blockchain strategy, fairly early on, and including a Dubai paperless strategy as well. So this is one government agency which was one of the first to actually deploy a production-grade project on blockchain, which is the Dubai Land Department. And they have actually gone ahead and chosen 4 out of 28 use cases that could actually have huge potential impact in improving efficiencies, bringing more transparency in the basic transactions on their systems. So obviously, I'm not going to touch upon the benefits of blockchain. We're familiar with that. So some of the use cases that went live, starting with what we call as a developer use case, is where the end-to-end sale transactions are put on the blockchain. So basically, if someone bought a piece of land or a property, their title deeds went onto blockchain. So it's a network which includes the developer, the bank, also the land department as well. So this basic use case has gone live, and they've recorded over 100,000 transactions on their network as well. There are also smart leasing use cases, which basically include the end tenant title deeds on the network, which also institutes having a digital check, including the utility payment. So basically, you rent out an apartment, you get your tenancy contract, and immediately you get your utilities activated as well. So this was one very interesting use case that has gone live. There are other use cases which are still being considered. One is a multi-listing service where you have sale and lease between brokers and the land department, and also the real estate licensing as well. So just quickly showing you, what a typical, use case looks like. So in the developer use case, as I mentioned, you have the master developers, you have the regulatory authority, you have the utilities provider, the bank. So it starts from the issuance of the SPA from the master developer. It's validated. The fees are being collected by the authority. You have the payments by the developer. If there's a mortgage on it as well, and then the final issuance of the title deed, and then it leads into the activation of your utility provider as well. I'm just going to skip this and get into the second use case. Now, this is something that we did with the Ministry of Education in Singapore through one of the partners. So essentially, it's a blockchain platform that eliminates fraud and tampering of digital certificates that are being issued by universities and schools. Primarily because there was a huge influx of issuance of fake certificates that were coming into the country, and they wanted to eliminate that. So this platform basically allows now all the institutes kind of issue their certificates on the network and allow any third party or institute to kind of verify that. We've actually launched that along with a telecom operator here in the Middle East called Due Telecom to basically provide a digital student passport. So when the students transfer schools, they want to validate their certificates, which usually took a couple of days to a week, is now near real instant. And again, it's authentic, it's immutable, and it's transparent as well. So this is one other use case. When it comes to AI, and I know everyone talks about the big brother, surveillance. When we built a platform which we call Emotix, it's a computer vision platform. We really looked at how we can enhance the capabilities of traditional businesses with some of these computer vision solutions. So we built a platform which is hardware agnostic, which looks at 5 different modules, right, from people intelligence, security intelligence, vehicle intelligence, asset intelligence, and anomalies. So some of the interesting use cases are, about identifying potential threats, detection of, a fight, a robbery scene. So very recent incident where I think a Lyft driver was attacked by one of the passengers. This was caught on the camera, and this is something that would have been easily captured, and we can easily alert the authorities using an AI-based system. Similar implementations. So one of the largest implementations that we have within the region is with one of the largest convention centers with about 32,000 square feet real estate space and about 220 cameras. It's quite interesting because what they've been able to do using emotics is basically analyze the flow of people within their venue without identifying any PII. And what it does is for them to kind of optimize their facility management costs. So now you have a clear understanding, what's the peak capacity at what times, do we have, major flow of people, is it event driven? Is it, specific to any patterns? And then, have an optimal, usage or basic, budgeting for their costs as well, facility management. So there's some very interesting use cases around emotics. In light of COVID-19, we've also looked at, how corporates or, facilities can look at enforcing social distancing in workplaces. So we use emotics to detect if, especially in factories, retail environments, if people are maintaining social distancing. This is a very practical use case. In fact, from a mass detection perspective, we've been able to do it on edge on, mobile devices. We can even detect PPE. This is, a spin-off of, another use case, which is looking at health and safety compliance, especially for, critical environments such as oil and gas, manufacturing areas, etc. Obviously, we are also able to use this to detect heat zones, especially in environments where we want to make sure there's no overcrowding of people, so that, especially in large convention areas, etc. You can now look at planning disinfection measures based on, the heat flow as well. And with COVID-19, everyone's focused on, trying to go contactless with payments, attendance as well. So one of the institutions and government organizations that we're working with has about 600 to 800 employees walking in every morning with biometric fingerprint-based attendance systems, and which obviously poses massive hazard. So we've actually implemented this. Here again, there are some considerations. This is on-premise. The data resides with the corporate. It's within their systems as well. So the data basically abides by their corporate data policies, and it's not on an external network. So this is a live case study. This has been operational for about 18 plus months now. So you can track details about actual count of people inside the venue, how many people have arrived, left, the total count of employees versus visitors inside the venue, and also understand the flow of people, whether it's a high traffic footfall, the occupancy, and link it back to any marketing related data for events happening at this exhibition center. So two other things that I'd like to kind of touch upon, going back to what Ben was talking about, how can AI be used, to tackle some of the challenges that, we are facing right now with COVID-19. One of the very interesting solutions that we were looking at, working with governments in Brazil, Italy, and elsewhere, was an end-to-end pandemic management platform, which is again built on blockchain and uses a lot of AI capabilities such as spread probability analysis based on the data that's being generated. So the platform, which is called Rebuild the Chain, is basically a platform that looks at contact tracing. Again, when you talk about contact tracing, the number one question that we get is about privacy. How is the platform, compliant with, say, the PEPPT protocol, which is for Europe, or GDPR, or even the D3PD protocol for Germany. So we made sure that the data on the platform, again, this is something which we've been going through, different governments, going through security audits. So we basically decouple any personal identifiable information from the user data, and any critical data that is required for contact tracing or health-related data, while still making it usable to understand what is the exposure analysis or what is the probability that a new hot zone might occur in a certain region. So while preserving the privacy, or while preserving the identity of the individual, we are maintaining a full contact trace platform. And at the same time, if by regulation or by law, if a person does need to share his identity for whatever reason, there is a consent mechanism, and that consent is actually recorded on the ledger as well. So that's one of the things that we've looked at. From the other point where Ben was talking about Ocean Protocol, we know them actually quite well. We were working with one of the government authorities out here as part of the data platform. So the idea was, as governments, every government has an open data initiative, and the idea is to make sense of the data, make it usable, practically usable, not just for government entities, but also for perhaps private organizations and society at large. So how do you make that data meaningful? If it's about garbage in, garbage out. If you have meaningful, quality, authenticated data, you can make sense of the data. And again, at the same time, how is this data going to be used? There's different classifications of data. There's open data, there's secret data, and there's private data. So how do you ensure that, as an organization, that data is not being misused, right? So this is where we conceptualized a platform which could be a data marketplace. Again, built on blockchain. It's a completely decentralized platform which allows individual private organizations or government organizations to hold their data and make sense of the data. Basically, create an ecosystem where data engineers can also play and create their own refined data sets. I think going forward, this could be potentially the future. As we say, data is the new oil, but we need to really kind of enable that ecosystem where you can enable government organizations, private entities to kind of start sharing that data more effectively. So yeah, that's just some of the experience which I could think of that I could share at this time.
Thank you, and fantastic insights, especially very concrete examples of the use of technology. So I would like to pass right now for a small time. We don't have a lot of time, but I will. We have a bit of us, so I think we can get around 10 minutes still, or a bit more, to discuss. So one of the things I would like to do as a kind of interactive panel. So both Maya and Ben have been talking a lot in the challenge that we have from the policy making, from making the government just aligning and having a concrete understanding how to deal with these things. And then there's the technology and as well the production of these things on an insulated way. One of the things that this panel is about how to change and create a society 5.0, or at least to tackle these problems on a cities and nations base. So is there ways we can actually, and I think I would like to pass this first to Maya from a policy making, then from Ben from a scientific, but as well from a technology, especially the projects you're doing. So is there a way we citizens can have much more action on this? Because I think all of us are part of this, okay? And of course, like Ben said, unfortunately, most of the budgets always go for the topics that we know they're not necessarily the best. And there's not changing history, unfortunately. I think the millions of years of history, unfortunately, have been changing, telling us that history has been repeating itself. But one of the things that is happening is the next 10 to 20 years, like Ben said, we're going to have a bit of a new inception of humanity. And this is happening right now. We are becoming a bit of androids with all the use of technology increasing. Right now, we are all even working from home. and passing more and more time without devices. And this is just the beginning, because there's healthcare, there's a lot of different things. So Maya, from a policy making, and you've been working with the World Economic Forum, and as well being a futurist and as well a science fiction writer, how do you look at this from a perspective of you as citizens? Because I think probably the future is going to be much more about scientific and academic based organizations that can actually lead and make a lot of change, instead of us just waiting for all the same politicians that have less, and I'm not discrediting any of them, because it's not, we cannot just put this unilateral, but most of them have no knowledge about technology and they are making the decisions on that. So I would like to look at that from your work, both as a research and policymaker.
Yeah, and you know, I don't make policy, I'm more research policies, but
Maya, you are muted.
Oh, I thought can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like with everything, is engage citizenry, and an engaged citizenry is also an educated citizenry. So educating people on all forms, bringing in more technology literacy to people. I think it's also important from the aspect of the technology leaders themselves to support that. I don't think that's happening. I really believe in multi-stakeholder initiatives, because we've got, we can't put everything on the citizens, we can't put everything on the politicians, and we can't put everything on the technologists. Really actually having more engaged multi-stakeholders, where we, I think one of the things that I also look at within diversity and inclusion and conversations that I'm hearing, it's very multilateral. It's technologists inviting people who are non-technologists to actually participate in conversations and participate maybe in decision making, because if we only leave it to the technologists to decide, that's one problem. Bringing in the politicians, yes, that's important, but I think also that the citizenry needs to be empowered to know how to vote, how to move policy. I'm speaking from the States. We have a lot of problems, but in the kind of local level and the state level, we actually, citizens have a lot of power to change things, but most people don't know that they can. So I think there is having forums that are much more inclusive, seeing that we bring in voices that are usually not included, creating bigger tables and going to other tables. That's what I actually talk about, is that who are we not inviting to these conversations? And then what conversations are being had without us? And then going there and empowering the people to actually have enough information, even if they're not technology literate by actually being able to develop, they at least get the knowledge and understanding of what these technologies are and what effects can actually happen on their life, so they can actually give educated response. And the response is moving policy, talking to their leaders, talking to the tech leaders. I mean, you can actually see what's happening within Facebook right now when your own workforce doesn't agree with your policies within, a company that's very authoritarian, because most companies are, but top down. So, you can actually change those things from within a company, but also that is, I believe, and I know that the reason why the workforce is saying this is not okay is also they're hearing it from their friends and families. So there is a lot about how we really open the conversation much more diverse, and really finding who's not including and making an effort to actually include them in these conversations, because these technologies are going to affect all of us. And there is you're either on the train or off the train of understanding this, but you're not going to be able to actually change it if you're not in the conversation and you don't even know what is happening. So again, this is where ethics and responsibility and accountability of the ones that are actually developing these technologies is paramount. So that's my reflection on this.
So Ben, you've been working a lot in the concepts, and thank you so much, Maya. Fantastic insights, and I think that is key because it has to come from inside the organization. So Ben, you are working with the SingularityNet, Humanity Plus, and you've been always having a bridge between the academic, the industry, and as well very big technology projects. So how do you deal with that? And of course, with different hats, and as well how you look at these areas?
I mean, I my PhD was in mathematics originally, actually, and part of the reason I chose that way back then in the 80s was it seemed like mathematics described the abstract structures underlying pretty much everything there is. At least it gives a valuable perspective on every domain of human pursuit and the physical world. And I would say increasingly, as science has developed, everything is cross-cutting, right? I mean, computer science, physics, and math cross-cut tremendously. Different branches of industry do. Biology has become an information science, and finance has been one for a very long time. And it's almost routine for a business to have to pivot across industry sectors. So I mean, I think we're entering a regime of the economy as we approach the technological singularity, which I suspect, along with my friend Ray Kurzweil, is coming within decades at most. We're at a phase where the way we chop up the world into academic versus nonprofit versus for-profit and into different industry sectors, this is going to have to be much more fluid, and we're going to be redefining this really year on year as we go along. And there's a need to really to focus on what's most fundamental, which is, I mean, compassion for humans and other living sentient beings, and the creation of new patterns, forms, and structures. I tried to, in my book, A Cosmist Manifesto, I talked about 3 core values of joy, growth, and choice, right? We want to spread compassion and happiness. We want to create new patterns and forms, and we want to foster individual choice and agency on the part of all sorts of systems. And so that there are core values that they're going to persist as we progress towards singularity, but the categories that we traditionally divide things into are going to become decreasingly relevant and decreasingly stable, I would say. And yeah, I think the audience for this event is a little more on top of this than the average human being, but in the end, we're all going to have our minds blown repeated times.
Yeah, it's and I think especially your work with Humanity Plus and a lot of the organizations you've been doing is critical, because there's always a component of academic, scientific, and technology, and as well the industry. And I think that is key. So as a wrap up, and I think we are passing a bit of the time, but just I want to still give a bit of a last minute, and we are almost the last panel. So Shamir, I think from the practicality of working with the governments, of course, you are a technology company, quite big company that works with a lot of major organizations. So how do you deal with the ethics? Let's say when you deal with the government that might be not working very well with the other government, and you guys have been working from NASA to intelligence agencies. How do you deal with this as well? Trying to make sure as well that that data doesn't stop. So data doesn't stop in the country A to country B, because it will pass. We might put a block, but there's always, so just a bit of context on that, because I think it's important, especially for our audience, to understand the complexity of as well, both building these things, thinking these things, and as well coming up with things that actually can change, especially the morale that we have worldwide. Like Maya mentioned, we've been going through a dysfunctional dystopian reality, especially in the last 4 years, that has been kind of increasing to a moment of people, although we are all obsessed with technology, we are all questioning technology. And I think this is a bit of a paradox. We love it, but we hate it. So I think and of course, it's not going to stop. Now you are on mute, yeah.
So, when it comes to implementing, AI at a government level as well, you got to think about 2 things. As an implementation company, what do we stand for? What are our values as well? Because at the end of the day, we work across borders. We have clients across borders, and we want to make sure that we stand right by it. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side is, as a client, what the government wants to do. Luckily, we've been working with governments that have a clear policy on how data is being used. So there are some clear guidelines on data usage. In fact, UAE is one country which has a clear policy, and they have got policies in terms of ethics on AI, ethics on data for AI as well. And from a data security standpoint as well, it's quite stringent. They have policies which state that all the data should remain on the soil of the region and not outside. So we have those policies in place as well. But if you look at most of the implementations, be it in the blockchain space or the AI space, one critical aspect which what we've seen work is to is that most of these organizations have done their study prior to actually implementing any of these solutions, right? So what they do during that study phase or the consulting phase is to understand some of the challenges in terms of data acquisition, data quality, data validation, the impact on different aspects of this project, be it challenges from a technology perspective, economical aspects, and societal benefits as well. And rightly so, because at the end of the day, it's basically building what we call as a smarter city. I wouldn't call it smart city anymore. It's a smarter city or an intelligent city. So these things actually have trickle down effects on the general citizens, the well-being of the citizens, even different sectors. If you look at it, the hospitality, travel and tourism, how comfortable is someone when they travel into the country, stay within the region? Are they being monitored? Are their data being tracked? So when the GDPR came about, a lot of companies started looking into how are we ensuring that citizens out of Europe are protected when they come into the region, because they have to abide. But typically, it's not just for Europe, it's also once you come into the country. So these are some of the guidelines and thought processes that are fairly set early on, and it's up to the organizations, the government as well as private entities to kind of look into enforcing these policies, and it's all encompassing. And at the end of the day, there could be regulations, but it's not just the regulations alone. It's about principles on how you actually implement, how is this actually taken into consideration and deployed at large scales. So yeah, that's been our experience so far. Luckily, we've been working with some amazing customers and governments that have thought through this process as well.
So I want to thank you all. Of course, I have plenty of questions, and especially with the work that all of you have been doing is amazing. So I think just speaking, as you mentioned, Ben, I think if you would spend 10% of the resources into education, health, instead of selling, killing, spying, and gambling, we would make a big change. So I urge everyone listening to us that we actually act on this. And as well, I think probably that we are conscious about this. And I think especially looking at the work that Maya and Ben are doing in thought leadership, Humanity Plus is a fantastic project that I think everyone should look. Another thing. So I want to thank you with all my heart for this participation. I respect you all in a lot of levels, and I hope we can actually have a better place. And we're going right now to the next panel, a bit late, but we have a break afterwards. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Live long and
It'll be a
prosper.
pleasure.
Yep.
Yes.